It used to be thought that Europe's westward expansion into the Western Mediterranean and then into the Atlantic world was driven by the rise of the Ottoman Empire. When the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople in 1453, it used to be theorized that broke down irrevocably the connections between East and West, and that Europeans, in order to get the stuff that they needed, had to start moving west. They couldn't move east anymore. It turns out that this distinction has been exaggerated, that there were plenty of avenues for trade and commerce with the East even after this event. So that's not the catalyst. The catalyst might be also thought about as being the fact that Europeans, for a very brief window of time, 2 centuries, were able to trade directly with China. When the Mongol Empire controlled China, Europeans were traveling along the Silk Road to China, and they were able to have access to luxury goods and bring them back to Europe in these ways. And after the Mongol dynasties are deposed, China closes its borders to Western travelers. So travelers have to start looking eastward. Have to start looking westward. And they need to start looking westward because Europe's capacity to produce gold and silver for coinage has itself shrunk. The mineral deposits in Europe have exhausted themselves. And moreover, European money is going to the East to buy these luxury goods that Europeans want. And so Europeans start looking for other sources of gold, and they look at Africa. So the explorers who first start making these forays into Africa tend to be those groups of people, Spain, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Catalonians, who have direct access to the Western Mediterranean. And they start establishing colonies in islands in the Western Mediterranean, including the island of Sicily, but other more westward islands. And they do start using colonial processes that are not new, but that are familiar to us from the modern world. They start displacing native populations, which in this case are Muslims, and they bring in colonists, and they establish plantations, and there's a high degree of violence. And then they start moving down to the coast of Africa and so on. The question about whether this is new is, as I said, difficult to answer, because if we think back to the Western civilizations that we've been studying in this book, we have to remember that the Phoenicians had trading colonies all over the Mediterranean, and indeed as far northwest as the British Isles in the middle of the 2nd millennium BCE. So colonial impulses are not new. What is new here seems to be obviously the direction and the scope of these endeavors. But I think that we have to remember that humans desire a capacity to explore, and humans need to expand their resources and their power bases is something that is really a recurring theme in Western civilizations and in human history.